Welcome to Between the Rig, a podcast hosted by Pushbox CrossFit. We're all about fitness and bringing you direct opinions wrapped in humor and a touch of, did they really just say that? We aim to help you understand more about coaching, gym ownership, and what it takes to get the most out of your fitness, mindset, and lifestyle, both inside and outside the gym. Let's get into it. All right, welcome to Between the Rig, a podcast by Pushbox CrossFit. And I'm excited today because we love talking about that sweet, sweet fitness. But part of that fitness is being able to be healthy enough to continue to do it. So we have our very own special guest, Adam Axmear. Welcome to the podcast, buddy.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you here. It's just us.
Yeah.
It feels more official because usually when we get coffee, it's like not in front of a podcast mic.
Not at all.
My heart's racing.
Yeah.
Mainly because I'm excited to be across from you.
Oh.
Yeah.
I feel that as well.
Thanks,
also,
man.
this is my first podcast, so this is like my heart's like,
yeah,
a little bit of that.
Well, you heard Josh in the first one.
Hilarious.
Yeah. And then just blossomed on the second one.
Did so good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
loved it.
probably regressing. I'm saying more vulgar things than I need to. But I'm having more fun.
I may be a little censored just because,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the amount of people who've been like, oh my gosh, you're going to have Adam on. I'm like, yeah, they're like, I'm excited. But I'm also like, who else is going to be there? I'm like, I think just us two. They're like, but who's going to keep you guys on track? And I'm like, me? Trisha's like, you're going to fuck that up.
We're in trouble.
I'm like, what do you mean? So I think going into this, my goal is do our best to keep us on track. Your challenge is every once in a while throw in syllable words of 3 or less.
Ooh. That's hard.
Yeah.
I struggle with it even with my patients where I'm like,
Yeah.
you don't know what I know. And
Yeah.
I'm giving you all these words and I have to like slow things down,
You do
back
you,
things up.
but if ever I jump in and be like, hey, what's the 101 version or
Yeah.
like book for dummies?
We'll boil some shit down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, man. No, but I'm excited because in the previous podcast, we've talked about just like who is Push, who are us, good English, who are we, our programming cycles. We had the unfortunate audio, but I think good quality of content when it came to nutrition, just kind of like brush upon that topic. But I think this is a topic that is vital, but probably either misunderstood or often overlooked, or it isn't as exciting to do than power cleans and burpees. And so we kind of neglect the things. And so, especially in the realm of CrossFit, it's not only how fit are you or what can you do, but it's really also about like, how quick can you recover? Like what is the volume and load that you can handle? And when is the right time to kind of hit the gas pedal, hit the brakes, and
Sure.
kind of work on certain things, prioritize certain things.
Sure.
So before we get into all that fun stuff, we're going to just kind of like ease into this, right? Because again, like we're in an official setup. If you're watching this and not listening, I was traumatized by the last audio and I've been on a hunt for better audio. So we are actually in this actual like professional podcast studio.
It's nice.
It is nice. We're
Yeah.
going to try this out, and thanks for having us. So really quickly, tell us just a little bit from, you have a doctorate.
I do.
So what is this? Like you're going to bring not only the perspective of just someone who loves fitness and exercise and
love
training
fitness.
and sports and just all that. You have a unique perspective because you also come through on the other side of the coin, which is you treat patients regardless of athletes or just kind of gen pop, right? So what is that background? Just a quick little like 60-second elevator ride.
Oh, well, I just like everybody else, the population of the Midwest where I came from, I played a lot of sports. I got into CrossFit actually from a bodybuilding standpoint. Like I actually was really into bodybuilding at one point in time
All right.
because I thought that was fitness.
Right.
Come to find out, not fucking fitness.
Right.
Not taking anything away from bodybuilders because
Nope. Yep.
very.
We brought up bodybuilders on the show before, but from the performance side of things.
Love them.
Yeah.
But I actually had a real like eye-opening moment when I was in Hawaii, like trying to surf.
When was this?
15 years ago,
Okay.
a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like almost died where I was like, ooh, I'm not fit. Like
Oh,
had
so
to drag myself on the beach, like almost like drown type shit.
Was it like you fell off the board and couldn't like swim back in? You're
Just
like, out of
exhausted,
shape?
mostly
Yeah,
just
okay.
exhausted. I was just
Okay.
like, holy shit, like I am breathing so hard.
Yeah.
My body is not functioning. I'm struggling. And then I came back to Kansas City and a buddy of mine was literally like running around 24-hour fitness. And I was like, what the fuck you doing? And he was like, I'm doing this thing called CrossFit.
Like you don't have to do that. There's dumbbells for curls over
I was
there.
like, yeah. And he's like, and I was like, what's it about? And he goes, it's on this website. And I was like, okay, I'll check it out.
Nice.
Literally that. Like,
That's how you know it's legit. It has a website.
It has a website.
It's a .com.
It was the original CrossFit
Yeah.
blog. Like, that's what it was.
Yep.
There was like this dude named Bingo that kind of like explained all the shit to the new people and like kind of like went through when the new cycles kind of kicked on. And I think I got off topic a little bit, but
No.
essentially like,
I do want to get into your kind of origin story.
yeah.
of
And
CrossFit.
so buddy of mine was running around doing this and I was bodybuilding and I was like, well, I'll check it out. And so I did like one workout and then I never went back to bodybuilding.
Really?
Yeah.
It sucks you in, right?
It sucked
You're
me
like,
in.
I'm going to die, but like, I'll come back tomorrow.
It was like, like my first Fran time was like over 9 minutes.
4 hours and 17
Yeah,
minutes.
forever. And then I just laid on the floor for 25 minutes, like just,
Yeah.
like trying to recover. And I was like, my like muscles are hot. My blood is boiling. My heart rate hasn't come down. I'm dying.
Yeah.
I was like, let's do more of that.
So when did you start your profession? Like how long you've been, what is your profession? Just so people know.
I'm a chiropractor. I handle mostly sports injury, but I do see a lot of gen pop, just like, chronic injury or chronic pain. But I do get a lot of, because I'm also kind of attached to the gym, for the most part. I do see a lot of sports injury, right? And I see it a lot here because we're in Seattle. For those that aren't in Seattle, listening to this, that we like people are active here. Like
a lot of things to do here.
Out doing things, and I see everything, you name it, which is really great because I get to experience something maybe from, I'm from Kansas City, the Midwest. We just moved here a year and a half ago. So I'm getting to see things that I normally wouldn't see, which is really fun. So,
well, now we're going to get into, so first of all, you're a liar. You're not from Kansas City. Where are you from?
Oh, I'm from Iowa. I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere.
I want to apologize, people. This is off to a shaky start.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so born in Iowa and how long do you live there for?
I was in Iowa for 20 years, a little bit over that. We don't need to get to days and months and anything like that.
Yeah.
But Kansas City for 18 years, and then did my undergrad in biology. With a human biology focus for the most part. I didn't take like ecology or environmental sciences or anything like that. Everything that I did was like human physiology, biomechanics, kind of leading me kind of to this path. But it honestly took me forever. College was not like this, I'm really good at this. It was, what do I want to do? And then I really got into fitness, really got into biology, started being a trainer in the CrossFit world, in the, just PT kind of world. And then
starts there and it moves.
It just kind of, it was like, well, how do I make this better? How do I now help these people that have all of these questions that are like, how do I get better at this? What's the cue for this? How does this work? And I was like, I don't know.
Let me find out.
But let me find out. Yeah. And so then it led me into the chiropractic realm because it was either that or physical therapy. To be honest, because I don't want to lie to you again. I just didn't want to fucking take the GRE because I thought it was a bullshit exam for a medical degree.
Okay.
Where, I thought I should have taken the MCAT, which is what you take to go into like med school.
Okay.
Which is much more science based. Where I was like, the GRE is such bullshit. And so
is that more your alley and passion? The kind of science.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
The inner workings of just kind of.
I love evidence. Like,
oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's neat. It really solves a lot of things.
struggle with a lot of the woo-woo stuff in the chiropractic world, but at the same time, there's a place for it. Like, that's totally, there's people that get better, right? Like, there's evidence out there that's like dry needling's bullshit, or this is, this modality's bullshit or whatever. But I like dry needling. I like some of these kind of like, well, we've seen this not be as effective in randomized control trials or anything like that. But people get better, and so it's kind of that where you have to be like, well, what's the clinical experience? What's this? What's that?
The overall objective is to get someone better.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's play a little game. Well, not really a game. This is just going to be your more recencies from Kansas City. So what is 3 things, 2 or 3, whatever kind of pops in your head, that you're like, man, Seattle really has this over Kansas City, and then the other way around? It could be like food, it could be people, it could be hiking, weather, just anything that pops.
The abundance here, right? Like there's just so much of everything where it's like, it's just such a bigger city, you know, where like, Kansas City, you've got like your kind of core, like we'll say restaurants, bars, things like that. Also, Kansas City's just kind of like a party city for the most part because there's nothing outside of it except for farm ground, you know.
Okay.
Like you have to travel. You have to travel quite a ways. The music scene's beautiful in Kansas City as well. Shout out there. And the people are just so nice, you know, because you're in the Midwest. Like
Seattleites or Kansas City?
Oh, Kansas City.
Kansas Cityans?
Kansas Cityans.
Okay. I play that game with a lot of cities and states.
Yeah, Kansas Cityans.
Kansas Cityites?
Say that. Sure.
Okay.
Seattle, you know, so I'm kind of jumping back and forth here. Seattle has just so much, right?
There's no structure to this podcast, if you've noticed.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's kind of how our conversations go anyway. So
mostly, yeah. We're just going to do the same thing just with a mic 4 inches from our face.
Yeah.
So music, Kansas City.
Music, Kansas City. Actually, music scene here. Crazy. Right. You know, like any night of the week, you can find 100 shows going on that are really fun, really, really beautiful. People doing cool shit. That's another thing here. People doing cool shit. Okay. Like go to Gasworks Park on a weekend and watch, you know, so many people doing just whatever they're into, you know? And I love that about this place where people are into what they're into and they have a passion for things and they don't give a fuck what you think.
Oh.
You know, and they're just going to do it. They're out there doing their thing. And if you're standing there and watching them, like they're not like, oh, that person's judging me. No, like
they were pretty accepting.
Very accepting. Yeah. I felt less of that in the Midwest where it's like, you know, you could be, you know, my buddy was in town here recently and saw some gentleman riding a unicycle, pulling a rickshaw, you know, and he's like,
so I was just going to say, what is the most Seattle thing you've seen or witnessed or heard a story about?
And so he was like, that's the most Seattle shit I've ever seen. And I was like, that's pretty Seattle where like,
I'm curious how do you get into that apparatus? Cause a unicycle,
he said there was a belt and like he had 2 handlebars and like, I don't know.
Can you imagine just like,
I hope this person hears this.
They're like, that was me.
Yeah, I hope so.
And you can get a ride at www.
The most Seattle shit I've seen was I was riding to work because I cycle now because now that's what you do in Seattle. Yeah. Also, you know, so just have to.
Yeah.
But I was riding one day and there was a gentleman walking towards me and you know, memory's a weird thing. We don't need to get into that.
Sure.
Yeah, tangent. Yeah. But I was watching this man walk towards me on U-Bridge and I look up and I see this just gold monocle. And I was like,
nice.
Huh. I was like,
which eye?
Right eye. Yeah.
Classic.
Yeah. But I was like,
classic monocle
strange,
position.
Right? Like also like strange just because he was like walking, you know, normally like you don't just need like monocles are more of like, I have a reading problem out of one of my eyes, you know, like not for like long distance, at least as far as I know. I'm not an ophthalmologist.
Right? He's like, you know what?
Or an optometrist. Yeah.
Fuck it. It's a Wednesday. I'm going pure monocle.
Monocle.
And teeny weeny beanie.
Yeah. So I think that's for the most part, that's the most Seattle shit I've seen where I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you noticed what we get called like the Seattle freeze, that it's a lot of like, hey, what do you do next Friday? It's like, I'm not sure. Like, you want to hang out?
People here
maybe
struggle with making plans.
Yeah.
I will say that. Where I'm the opposite, where I'm like, you want to hang out? And then I'm like, what day, what time? Let's fucking get this done.
But the funny thing is, it's like, I'm a Seattleite original. And I feel like there's a lot of people who've moved here for a variance of reasons. And you would think that would kind of like wash out. Mm-hmm. But it's like, no, we get you.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, where are you from? It's like New York. They're like, want to hang out tomorrow? They're like,
I may have shit.
I
like,
might have some potential almost things to do.
Yeah,
I'll let you know.
You're third on the list, you know, because I may need to like wash my dog or go get groceries or like whatever. But you're kind of, you know, maybe seeing you is an okay thing. So
all right. Yeah. So question, just because you like your big words and you're very smart. What is your favorite body part that is fun to say? Just purely from an articulation standpoint, like vastus medialis obliquus, or you know. Just comes to mind.
One of my favorite muscles is actually popliteus.
Oh, say it again.
Yeah, popliteus.
Yeah, damn right it is.
You want a little slower, a little more. Popliteus.
What is that, 4 Ps?
Yeah.
It
lives behind your knee. It creates internal rotation of your tibia. Like it's important. Okay. It does some stuff, but it's so tiny. And most people are like, I got knee pain, and I'm like, well, do you have tibial rotation? Can you do these things? Does this work?
And they're like, what's that?
And most people, when I say popliteus, are like, you know, is that a hamstring? Like,
has anyone ever tried to just like bullshit back with you? They're like, oh, for sure. You're like, I know you don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
You know, I get that sometimes where I'm like, you have no idea what I'm saying. You know,
but you just start making words up.
I'm not that person.
Okay.
Like I really, I'm an honest human being for the most part. I do struggle with that. You know, where I'm like, I can't bullshit you here, but I know you're fucking with me.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I feel like now that we're kind of done with our little like personal intro, we'll jump back and forth.
Yeah.
I would love to hear more just of your perspective, who is someone who is in your profession, who sees a lot of people from, again, just accountants who don't work out to high-end athletes. And that doesn't even necessarily need to be high-end CrossFit athletes. I'm sure you see a lot of them. But like you said, in Seattle, there's a lot of just outdoor things we can do. I'm sure anyone who has anything that feels weird, you've treated and seen.
Yeah, I see a lot. And that's from, Joe Schmo, who sits at a desk for 8 to 12 hours a day, who doesn't get up. I've had that where I'm like, oh, honestly, I just need you to like take a walk. Yeah. Like twice a day. Just move. Every 50 minutes, just.
Hey, that thing over there, get up and go. Just go get it.
Get up. Actually, I think I told you the story. I was in San Diego here recently for a seminar, and my Lyft driver.
Was that cosplay?
It was cosplay.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what they call them, seminars.
I'm more of a Princess Leia.
Yeah. Okay.
So, she was like, I got back pain, and I'm like, okay, what do you do? And she's like, well, I drive this Lyft. And I'm like, okay. I was like, is that it? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, you should get up. You should get out of your car sometimes. You should just take a walk.
You're like, there's this Unicycle rickshaw thing that I could really turn you on about.
One, you could probably increase your, income, but two, your back probably wouldn't fucking hurt. And so I try to be nice to,
position?
For sure. She just was seated all the time. And it's, a lot of people it's like the world we've come to enjoy and love is becoming much more sedentary, right?
I feel like I should stand up doing this podcast now.
Well,
you hit us with
we're only going to be here for an hour.
Yeah, right.
So.
Yeah, mainly because we're capped. You and I would probably just keep on talking.
This could be a day thing.
And there's no windows in this room. No. So I feel like I'm in like
zero
a casino
distractions
or something, right? Yeah. So just because you mentioned the seated part, I remember you hit us with a stat a while ago, and I'm not going to quite quote it because you know it more than I do, but I remember it was one of the stretch sessions that we have on Saturday with you, and I love stats and data and all that stuff.
Same.
And you were kind of showing the different relationship to the pressure and load on your back relative to laying on your back, kind of heels up, and like you're sitting in a chair and you got tipped over, standing and seated. Will you quickly just like stat us really quick?
So this was actually when I was in school. It may have changed now. Like I quote this mostly just, it's not a scare tactic by any means, but it's like, hey,
eye-opening.
when you're standing, like your body weight, depending on obviously like, how you stand or whatever, we don't need to get into the minutia.
Like a flamingo, most likely.
Right. One-legged.
At least me.
Some people do. I catch myself, that way anyway, but I digress.
Yeah.
So,
but
100%, like 100% of your body weight is into your discs at that point. So if you just think about it that way, we're like, I weigh 180 pounds.
Okay.
So when I'm standing, we'll just say the force of my body weight is 100% into my discs at that point in time.
That's a silly question, just because like not all your weight is above the low back. It still has that load and pressure.
Gravity is a motherfucker.
Weird,
So we don't need to talk about it, but I'm mad about it. But it also is really nice. It helps us do things. So
so it's about 100%.
100%. When you're seated, it's actually 150% because of actually like a little bit of flexion into your lumbar spine. That like your joints aren't taking any of that. The muscles aren't being active in that position, right? Like we're both seated right now, and you're like, oh, I need to stand up, but we're passively loaded at the moment. At least for a little bit, right? Like my back is in a flex position. I can feel it against this chair. Yeah. You kind of think about it a little bit. You bring attention to it. But when you're laying down, actually, I tell a lot of my low back pain patients,
That's a tongue twister.
Crazy.
Popliteus?
Popliteus.
Okay.
So that they need to lay on their back, put their legs up on a chair, like in a 90-90 position, so knees bent, kind of
like
just
you're seated and someone just pushed you over.
100%.
Okay.
Yep.
What does that do?
Actually reduces the pressure on your discs down to like 25%. Now, again, this was a stat that I got when I was in school.
Okay.
But a lot of people are like, oh yeah, like it just like unloads that spine, unloads your discs, allows you to be able to relax, allows you to breathe efficiently.
Yeah.
It just kind of is that like really nice position that you can like just relax into and let your back kind of like fall on the floor or whatever. We can get into anatomy and biomechanics and stuff like that about like how your back should be. We don't need to go into developmental kinesiology or anything. So,
but we could, but we won't. So you're saying like, all right, taxi, Lyft, Uber person, just kind
all
of
day.
just get up
8,
and move because
10,
you're in that seated position.
Just
We
get up
now
and
know
move.
that's like 1.5 times loading.
This
Just
is my desk worker person that I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
just get up and move, right? My CrossFit athletes, or the people that are like super active, I'm like,
They lay in their back a lot anyway because usually when they're done with the workout, it's like I'm
Dead.
Like this morning.
dead.
Oh my gosh,
I laid on my back.
that workout was so hard.
So hard.
Immediately,
But
I was like, what was that?
those people, I'm like, hey, like you do a lot of stuff. You're doing things. The other thing that I love to talk to my patients about, I'm like, hey, like I know you don't deem yourself an athlete because you're not like on a team or you're not
Sure.
like competing on a regular basis or anything like that, but you're still an athlete.
Yeah.
Like you're doing shit. You're out running. You're out doing these things. Like you need now maybe a team of people to help you keep doing the things that you're doing. We're not getting any younger. I don't know if anybody noticed. Time doesn't stop, you know?
You know, I thought I've observed that before.
Just
Linear time. Yeah.
yeah. But I'm like, you know, find people that you really like, massage therapists, acupuncturists, chiropractors, physical therapists, whatever, you know, in the realm of manual therapy, in the realm of physical therapy, and find somebody that you
But
really
not
like.
any type of massage therapist.
Whatever you
The
like.
R-rated
Whatever
kind?
you're into.
Okay.
Whatever you're
That's
into.
a slippery slope. But
No judgment.
Yeah.
Whatever you're into. So
just get rubbed.
get rubbed.
Okay, cool. We'll make that a shirt.
Yeah. That would be actually, I'd buy
good-
that. I'd buy that.
So,
I had a
okay.
patient walk in the other day with a boat on his shirt that said, I like pulling out. So I
Good Lord.
I couldn't even stop laughing.
Nice.
And he was like, I forgot I had this on.
I feel like that's one of those shirts you find at like Urban Outfitters in 2005.
Yeah. It was a tank top.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So what would you say, or two to three, whatever kind of pops in your head, injuries you see more often in people who are the kind of what we'll call gen pop? You know, like I'm not hiking this mountain. I'm not doing an activity. I'm not doing CrossFit. And then is there any correlation or similarity, or are there now 2 to 3 different types of injuries you commonly see within CrossFitters or more, you know, soccer players or hiker? You know, like you have the active and less active
Sure.
individual, essentially what I'm asking.
Less active people, normally it's like my back hurts because I've been sitting all day. My
Okay.
neck hurts because I'm on a computer all day.
Punch forward or-
And I really I struggle with it's postural. I'm not it's your posture. I think it's more of you're just weak. Like
that's
you're
that's
not.
our first hot take. It's not your posture.
It
could be.
There's, again, evidence. There's no research to back that, right? Like there's nothing out there. It's like
We don't need it.
posture hurts people, you know? And so these people are like real posture freaks. You can go the other way. You can be like too into like being like, I'm going to hold this position. And now you create rigidity in
It's
your
funny you say
systems.
that because I was just like browsing on YouTube and came across like RP Strength, and he was also saying like essentially this is not just like don't blame your posture. There's a lot of it goes into what you're doing, your kind of biomechanics, how you're just born,
Yeah.
you know, the
Yeah.
anthropometrics of things. Like, so, because I think it's a common thing. Oh, you need to do more, you know, X, Y, or Z, and pull back, and it'll just abracadabra things.
Create strength.
And is it kind of like not as cut and dry like
It
that?
just can't be, right? Like
Yeah.
nothing is black and white like that where it's like, oh, your posture caused you to have all this pain.
Okay.
Like that's complete and total bullshit. Is it a contributing factor? I don't see why not.
Yeah.
Right? Because if I'm weak, let's say my upper back is weak and I like spend 8 hours of my day just like sitting with my head over my computer or on my phone or anything like
Yep.
that, like of course I'm stretching those tissues. I'm compressing discs. I'm, you know, compressing other tissues. Like there's so much happening, right? Like actually, I think you and I talked about this yesterday. I was like, when we were in school, we had classes on anatomy, right? Like systemic anatomy, which is just everything. And then you kind of boil everything down. We had one class on just head and neck anatomy, right? Like there's so much shit going on in your head and your neck that we had
And not just physically.
not just physically or mentally, you know?
Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so to be compressing and stretching all those tissues constantly is going to affect those things, right? Like, and if it's just maintained in that position for 6-8 hours a day, you know, without getting up, without moving, then obviously you're going to be causing some problems, you know?
Yeah.
So, but it's not all again, posture.
Just this or just that.
Just this or this.
All right. So low back and neck.
Low back and neck for like my like sedentary people for the most part. Every once in a while I'll get to some, they're like, oh, I started walking, running, doing things like that from you know, it's like that couch to 5K type shit.
Yeah.
I'm not, sorry. I'm not
Maybe.
judging those people, but like,
No.
you should
Yeah.
know.
If you're doing the audio version, we shot each other a look.
Yeah. But those people, like, normally they just go too fast, right? Like, their tissues aren't ready for those things, you know, where it's like, oh, you should have actually started with like a walk run program or like just a walking program or anything like that. Now with my athletes, you asked about soccer, you asked about like CrossFitters primarily.
Most people are going to be listening to this really, I'm going to assume, at least initially, are more active than not.
For sure.
We're always kind of looking for that, like, what is that little secret sauce?
They're probably
what is
all
that thing?
people from the gym for the most part.
Right, yeah. Which, hey, we don't injure people, but things happen.
Things do happen.
So what do you see traditionally?
Low backs mostly, and shoulder. Low back and shoulder in CrossFit. And I think a lot of that is, and this is purely opinion in this, but this is just what I see. Trunk instabilities, stabilizing strategies that we've talked about as like extension compression, more compensation than actual ideal loading mechanics, which we've talked about in depth a lot. Shoulders, I think a lot of that's just like previous injury that maybe, you know, from high school to, you know, becoming an adult, getting older, overhead positions that aren't
never
quite,
fixed it, built up scar tissue, and then just jumping from
coming right
0
back
to
into
100
it.
and want to learn how to kip.
I want to learn how to kip. I want to learn how to snatch, right? Like snatching is a crazy technical lift.
Dude.
And so many people are like, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to snatch, like for guys especially, 225. And I'm like, how many years of Olympic lifting have you done? You know, if you look at Olympic lifters,
like I power lift, and like that's not what I asked, and not the same.
Yeah, and now you know your rotator cuff actually doesn't have that mobility. You're now creating an extension compression stabilizing strategy. You're creating this open chain position or open scissor position. Your shoulder blades don't even know how to stabilize in space, and now you're asking them to hold weight overhead that you've just thrown up there in less than 2 seconds.
Right.
You know,
you have, so anyone who knows us will. We'll jump from PG to rated R real quick in certain terminology.
All day.
We all now know, and it's becoming a thing, even with like a logo, is like my phrase, the taint swinger.
Love it.
Yeah. I love it too. Yeah. And I'm glad people.
I've been that person, and I am that person sometimes.
I think we all get there, you know, but
fatigue happens.
Yeah. Fatigue is real. Now, speaking of taint, you said something a while ago, because I know you're big into breathing and bracing.
I am.
And the importance of that. And I'd love for you to kind of just go on a few minute tangent about that and the importance, because I think it's often overlooked, and I absolutely agree with you. But I remember also one of the first couple, maybe, Saturdays, you said the phrase, breathe through your butthole.
Breathe through your butthole.
And I'm like, yes.
Not through it, but into it.
Will you explain that for those who don't visualize breathing
how that
into
works.
or through your butthole?
Yeah. So that cue actually was breathe into your taint. I had a
so we're taint squared.
We are taint squared.
Nice.
There was a practitioner, and he's in Chicago. Shout out to Robert Lardner. He's a fucking genius.
He seems nice.
Wild human being.
Oh, cool.
And he was helping me at a seminar. This is when I was in school. Okay. And he was helping this group with us, and a buddy of mine like couldn't figure out how to like breathe into his lower abdominal wall, breathe into his pelvic floor.
Okay.
And he walks up and he's like, breathe into your taint. And I just was like
standing?
I lost it.
Seated?
Yeah. He was doing a squat. He was trying to squat into this position.
Can you breathe into your taint via any position?
All the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So what that is, if we want to like get into this, biomechanically,
do want to get into it.
We're already in.
Yeah.
At least knuckle deep.
You have permission. Yeah.
So what that is it's your ability to create intra-abdominal pressure. So
what does that mean?
Intra-abdominal pressure is when you use your diaphragm to push your abdominal contents. I used to say guts and stuff, but that sounds kind of weird because, I
will say, though, to interject, I think you're doing a great job not using crazy big words.
I'm trying. Yeah.
I think you're crushing it. And I just want to let you know I appreciate this effort. I acknowledge your effort.
Thank you.
So
also, the cuss words that I've used, I think, has been minimal as well.
Because you did a fucking great job.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Fucking appreciate it.
Yeah.
So,
okay, but guts and all that, like
guts and all
maybe
that.
more
all the things, liver, right? Like you have major organs that are happening, but mostly guts and stuff. So when that
t-shirt.
guts and stuff,
guts and stuff,
that may be more of the X-rated version.
Yeah.
And as you're into that position, as your diaphragm pulls down, it flattens and it creates from a dome shape, right? So it is your primary respiration muscle. The other things that are happening is, minutia, rib flare, rib expansion, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But in this process, you're pushing with your diaphragm all of your guts and stuff into your pelvic floor. Your pelvic floor then actually eccentrically loads. So it's being stimulated or pushed against. And so it's eccentrically loading or isometrically loading. And it's stabilizing your pelvis or helping stabilize your pelvis. And which your pelvis is not your hips, by the way, even though, a lot of people are like, oh, I have hip, this is kind of a tangent, but I have hip pain. And they'll like point to their back.
We'll allow it. Continue.
What's our time? And anyway, pelvis is like pelvic structure as far as like, it doesn't matter. But as we do that, your transverse abdominis, your obliques, your deep trunk stabilizers. Okay, so all of the musculature, all of the fascia wrapped around your abdomen, which people call core. I call it a trunk.
Okay. Any reason why?
Actually, because of one of the docs that I follow, who he's like kind of like one of the top experts in this, where he's like, I hate the word core. He's like, let's call it a trunk, just because I think it's better because
Where
it's
do you
actually
regionally describe that? Because when I say core, I think a lot of people would think, oh, my six pack. I'm like, well,
exactly.
I usually go from like nipple to butt cheek line, 360 degrees of stabilization.
That's pretty good. But if you think about this, my trunk actually is from like the top of my, like collarbones. Okay. Right. Because all of this has to be stable for me to use my extremities. So this is like
the
trunk.
Throat nubbins?
Your SC joints. These are SC joints. Okay. So
you can tell who's the doctor and who's just the coach.
Throat nubbins.
Throat nubbins.
I like that.
You've never heard that?
It's in this position that you have to stabilize this to create core or trunk to extremity movement. I don't know. I almost fucking said it. Goddamn. Slap myself on the wrist. So in that position, if you can't create that, now what's happening is as the guts and stuff are being pushed down, all these things are expanding. We're getting 360 degrees of expansion. Okay. We're getting pressure in this wall of your abdomen that is then you're eccentrically loading. That's that, like, I always tell people, like, push out against it and not like contract, not like suck in and like pull your belly button up or like hollow that position. I actually want you to actively push away and then be able to breathe, because what you're doing is you're voluntarily pulling your diaphragm down, creating that pressure, and then you're still being able to use your diaphragm. This is where we get into like functional capacity versus compensation.
The way you're just verbally describing that, I agree. I think a lot of people are like, oh, brace your core, and they suck in. I'm like, you're more flex, but it's not optimal. I think about almost if you're in a barrel, brace and push out and try to fill up the kind of the space left. Or I always say like you're about to take a sucker punch or a tickle attack, like you're bracing, almost pushing in. So I'm gonna interject here because I'm just very curious. I want a black or white answer, even though I know it's not. Pro or anti lifting belt?
I am pro.
Okay.
And I am pro at a certain percentage, actually, like above 80% of your one rep max. And the reasoning is...
I would agree. I would say no lower than 70, 75, but really like start to build up.
Yep.
And I would agree, though. Like there's a certain time and place for it.
Certain time and place for it. So again, not black and white. I've tried, I think it's good for people to go without for a while and work on that ability to maintain trunk stability through those positions. And then when they're starting to create a compensatory movement pattern, to like be like, okay, that's all I'm doing for the day. Because I've now stressed that system to a point where I'm no longer able to maintain this without, we'll say a brace or a belt, right? Like something.
Do you like that
artificial.
Tactile response?
I also like the tactile response. I benefit from it.
Like pushing in instead of sucking in.
Yep, that pressure against it. And there's a way to use it, right? Like most people tighten up their belt too much.
It's almost like you're squeezing into like a smaller...
I'm sure there's like a whole podcast on just like how to use your fucking belt.
Probably not. We should do it.
We'll do it.
We'll probably do the
It'll
first
be
one
2 hours.
Yeah. Just how to put a belt on.
Right. But those people are like, you'll watch it in some of these videos where like people just like tighten their belt down so much, but then they can't even breathe in that position.
I feel worse. I mean, I think we've all made that whoopsie daisy when you first put on a belt. You're like, oh, it's suck in and squeeze, but then you kind of breathe out and you're like, oh, I don't feel good. Yeah. And then you're usually always going for a really big lift and you're like, oh, I don't feel good at all.
Don't feel good. You usually lose your breath. You're like kind of panicked, right? Because there's that sympathetic response. That's neither here nor there on that, but like it's being able to pressurize that system and stabilize your spine. One, now subconsciously your brain even goes, oh yeah, I'm protected. Like why, like I'm not worried about hurting myself in this position. But this also plays into something I missed was like co-contraction of your abdominal wall versus.
What does that mean?
Like as I engage my abs, like even my six pack in that position, like I want that to be
good for you, by the way.
Engaged. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then my trunk, or not my trunk, but my lumbar erectors or my lumbar like intrinsic muscles, the real small muscles that surround your spine, that create little like movements, those also need to be engaged. So that co-contraction of those things create a like this motion instead of one being on and one being off, or the other one doing the other thing and then pulling you into flexion.
Simultaneous.
They're working together, right? Like, and that's kind of there's always this like big bitch about being like shutting muscles off. And it's like, well, not really. You're like eccentrically controlling those things. Like they're lengthening under tension while you're doing, you know, even if I'm doing like a bicep curl, my triceps are still helping stabilize the shoulder. You know, it's like not just my bicep working really hard in this position. Everything else is also helping.
Even though it's like, we always use that as like an example of like, oh, it's an isolated lift. And like, there's always more going on.
There's so much more. And this is where we get into like joint centration and synergistic movement patterns and being able to like use your antagonists and agonists together. And actually I should have said that the other way, but those things, you know,
I don't think anyone would have caught that.
They, not our population.
Yeah.
But those things like, they matter, you know, and especially like when we start talking about squatting or lower extremity mechanics and like loading your trunk in those positions. And then now I'm trying to create force through the floor and fight fucking gravity.
Well, it's important, right? Because you usually in CrossFit, we'll get a little more specific. Like you even watch the elites, like, okay, yes, there's always like that longer swim or that longer run or that one big lift, but the rest is usually a pretty decent percentage of our maxes, but for multiple reps. Under the pitter patters of breathing and just being fatigued. And so I feel like a lot of people don't even recognize when I'm in class, I'm like, hey, like, what's your breathing like? They're like, I wasn't even paying attention. I'm like, this is vital. Like, this is what you're bracing every single time to absorb this. So usually it's not even like, oh, I lifted wrong. Like my form is bad. It's, I'm getting caught up in just like, oh my God, I'm going to fucking die. And then it's that one rep that we just kind of slightly go whoopsie daisy. Because, you know, we have that in real life. Like, oh, I dropped this book. I went to go pick it up. And we get that low back spasm.
So
like, what the shit?
I do see a lot of that. Like, oh, I
did the 500 pounds. I can't pick up a pen.
I was cleaning out the dishwasher, right? Like I've heard that. I went to bend over.
Did you hear me? I can do the 500 pounds.
Oh yeah. Did you?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Fuck yeah.
Pay attention. No, but it happens all the time.
It happens all the time. And so those people, it's like, well, more than likely you probably live in a compensatory state of extension compression stabilizing strategy. And so you eccentric loading or elongating those tissues to just go pick up a pen or go pick up your child or something like that. You don't have the control there. There's no, I have control of this trunk. I have stability of this trunk. So if we get into those talks, like stability is your ability to maintain like joint centration. Again, most osseous connection.
I actually do want to get into this because even in my notes, I think flexibility and mobility are often, it's like they know the words, they don't quite know them. And then it's like, once I get into that position, I need to stabilize there. So it's almost like this hierarchy of, okay, like where do you, I think I even wrote down like, can you quickly, again, like a 30-second quick thing, flexibility, mobility. I guess I've always looked at it as flexibility is, and again, this is just kind of like a general blanketed, like that is my muscles, mobility is my joints. And then can I get into certain positions? And now that you can, let's say, because I think a lot of the times it's just like a blanketed, oh, you need to stretch that more.
Yeah.
And like, okay, why? And sometimes like maybe not. Like hip flexors is a big one.
Maybe I need to strengthen that.
And then we need to strengthen the hip flexor. Like do the couch stretch. You now have this new range of motion that you've probably never traveled in. So you're not going to be stabilized. You're not going to be stable or strong enough there. So I think there's more than just stretch that.
Yeah. I live more like flexibility. I'm flexible. People being flexible is like more like your joints allow for those motions, right? Like to enter them. Mobility is like my ability to control or have muscle control at those end range points.
Oh, I like that.
And then stability is my ability to maintain stability through an end range. And it may be different than my actual mobility. I may not have stability at the end range yet, and that's what we kind of like strive for or work for. But your mobility is like the end range, right? Like me creating like maximum end range external rotation in a like just an active range of motion, right? Like unloaded.
Yeah.
But then if I put a load in my hand and then try to make that motion, it may be less because my joints actually don't have the ability to control or stabilize it through that space.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've always kind of used the visual of you can take like a baby and you can just like wrap them in a pretzel.
Mm-hmm.
But they probably don't have that stability and strength and even just self-awareness, like hold that position. They just like unfold.
Yeah.
But then you take,
Passive.
Like a 52-year-old client, and like you'd have to take 3 of us just like force a body part into a certain pretzel. But they can probably contract and hold for at least a little longer.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. That's actually like something we talk about quite a bit in my stretch sessions is like, do you have end range control here? Can you access those things? This is where
you get there and just like immediately snap back
or is
out
it
of
like, ooh, I can't even like contract in this position. It hurts when I do. And this is where like FRC comes into play, functional range conditioning, guys. Okay. And I use some of these things in my clinic where it's like, or not my clinic, but the clinic that I work in, where it's like, hey, like we have to be able to control this at end range. You know, if you're doing these things, let's say you're, especially CrossFit athletes, and this is coming into play of like doing pull-ups, doing kipping pull-ups, doing butterfly pull-ups, or what's the other big one? Like, those kind of take our shoulders to end range a lot of times. Ballistic movements, right? Like dynamic movements. Do you have control over long periods of time? This is where compensations, we like kind of pitfall in those compensations because it's like, oh, actually I've lost functional capacity here. Now I'm just hanging on for dear life, right? It's like, I think push-ups is a really good one as well because, Matt, you start off doing push-ups really well and then all of a sudden your shoulders are creeping into your ears because your upper traps are taking over to stabilize your scapulas to allow for you to still create pressure through your triceps, which are a very strong muscle, but your actual little baby scapular stabilizers or lower trap serratus muscles don't know how to like function and stabilize.
Every time someone does a push-up and then they get tired, they actually push through like the top end of a plank better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm like, just go there.
Every time.
Everyone's like, you don't really program push-ups a lot. And I'm like, I guess I don't. I'm not like anti them as the movement. I think I'm just more,
most people
as
are
a coach, I'm
really
like,
bad at them.
Just a fucking dumpster fire.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, oh, I do like 4 joking examples. They laugh. I'm like, I'm talking to you, buddy.
Yeah. I
do it.
This is one of my favorite stories actually from school. So we were watching videos in one of my classes of energy healers. And and everybody's laughing. Everybody's having like energy, like
crystals and
like laying hands, like not quite touching people, like whatever those people
I'm just gonna
are.
hover gently above you and like
and then I'm
feel
gonna
your leg hair, but not actually.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw that demon or whatever, bad energy into the corner.
Sure.
Weird shit. But again, hey, if it helps you,
no offense.
I'm trying to offend somebody.
Yeah.
But those people, like my professor at the time was like the dean of our school, and he's like, you're all laughing. He goes, but there's gonna be at least 2 of you that do this. And
just big into fucking energy here.
Yeah, like we're all laughing, we're all like thinking this is hilarious, but he's like, at some point you're gonna fuck up. Like I'm looking at you. It's one of those where not you, but like you know what I mean.
I probably would.
In the class when you're coaching, you're like talking about good push-ups. You're like, there's at least, we'll probably say 50%. People are going to fall apart.
Yeah.
Again, when we talk functional capacity, can you maintain those positions through like long-term movement patterns? Oh no. Well, then we're going to move into compensatory movement patterns. And this actually plays into like heavy lifts, like deadlifting, back squats, things like that.
Yeah.
Where you're now like, oh, I have the functional capacity to maintain this intra-abdominal pressure and this really good stabilizing strategy for, we'll say, 5 reps of this amount of weight. But then once I jump past that, like that 1% above that, everything falls apart. And now I have to compensate with maybe an extension compression stabilizing strategy or some form of hollowing or whatever, right? Like insert whatever movement, right? Like I have to incorporate or bring on these other large muscle groups to help stabilize these little baby stabilizers that I haven't like are fatigued and dying.
Yeah.
Not dying, but
What is your favorite lift?
Ooh. It used to be clean and jerk.
Okay.
Now I think I'm just kind of like
as an elderman. What is your
as an elderman? I think it's just back squatting. Like I've kind of moved away from the Olympic lifting, mostly due to my checkered past of injuries. So
It's funny you say that because I'm going to get back into a stat I have written down, but just
Cool.
let's just kind of bookmark
Yeah,
this.
I used to Olympic lift quite a bit. I
Yeah.
absolutely loved it. It was one of my most fun periods.
Was it
of my
bodybuilding, Olympic lifting, CrossFit?
No, not at all. It went actually
Cool.
bodybuilding, CrossFit, into Olympic lifting, powerlifting, kind of a little bit of CrossFit still. And then I came back into the CrossFit world. Actually, I helped my brother train for an ultra marathon and then back into CrossFit.
Okay.
So, but I competed one time in the Missouri Valley State Championships.
What
and
color was your singlet?
It was red.
Yeah, it was.
Maroon? Red. I have a video. But I actually won. I was
Nice.
the Missouri Valley State champ. So
All right.
it was during an ice storm, so not very many people showed up, but I
Hey,
fucking
man,
won.
they don't.
Champ.
You won.
Yeah.
All right? Just because there's one of you there
So,
doesn't
but I
mean-
also, like, I think I PR'd both my lifts in that. I had a really great time. I loved it. Like, I actually
right.
really enjoy coaching Olympic lifting as well. It's one of my
Yeah.
favorite things to do. I, like, get pumped when people do cool shit.
You seem pumped now just talking
I'm
about
pumped.
getting
I'm
pumped.
sweaty.
What is your
6 to
favorite
midnight.
body weight movement?
Ooh.
Fitness related.
I don't, you know what? You know me. I just
do.
love fitness where I don't dislike anything.
If you had to make a triplet of a cardio, a weight lift, and a gymnastics, what gets you like 6 to midnight?
That's tough. I'm kind of equal opportunity. Like, I don't bitch about movements. I love to do, like,
Don't get me started about complaining.
That's actually why I brought it up.
You just want to hear that analogy
Yeah.
again.
But I don't bitch about movements. I'm here to do it all. If I can't do something, I will find a modification or a scaled version of it that I can then incorporate. I'm kind of equal opportunity. Like, I'm there for all of it.
Well, it's funny you brought up
So-
weightlifting because I think I'm sure as someone who has done it all, who still does CrossFit and weightlifting and just love making fitness and being active, but you're also on the side of the coin that like heals people and they're kind of broken.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's always a stigma in CrossFit, like you're going to get injured. It's high injury. And it's interesting stats. So it was a 4-year study based on the National Institute of Health. And this is per 1,000 hours of training. CrossFit has a 0.27. So like if I got injured once, right? So I got injured 0.27 times out of every 1,000 hours of training.
Yeah.
Olympic lifting is 2.4 to 3.3. Football, American football, is 8 injuries every 1,000 hours of training, 36 per every 1,000 hours of competing. Basketball actually is more, 18.3 for every 1,000 hours of training, 24.7 for the same amount of hours of competing. And then soccer has a big kind of range of 4 to 35. But they kind of, I was reading more that has more shorter durations, like a lot more like little hamstring strains and ankles. So
Sure.
like, so I think it's important to understand also, do you have an opinion when people are like, oh, CrossFit hurts you? I'm like, well, anything in theory could, but we're now seeing statistics over a 4-year span that 0.27 compared to upward of 35.
Yeah.
Not really.
Nope.
And even not doing anything is worse because, as you said, time continues. We get older.
Yep.
We get more sedentary. Things build up, gunk up, and it's worse. So would you agree that when you kind of have this stigma here, and you said earlier, a lot of low back, a lot of shoulders. I feel like the amount of stories I've heard over about 15 years of coaching is, I used to do this in high school or college, and then I just stopped doing that thing. Like, I stopped doing it hard. And now I'm just going to get back into it. And there's this like biological age and there's training age. And then how consistent are we to, probably move through that end range of motion to strengthen and stabilize. And then we just are impatient as people and want to jump into kipping because we saw it.
First thing is, greatest predictor of injury is previous injury. So
Ooh.
that people should know that. Like, if you've already had an injury,
That's a fun sentence.
you're more likely to injure that again.
Yeah.
If you have not taken the appropriate steps
Yeah.
to strengthen, create tissue adaptation, which actually is one of my favorite things to talk about, where I'm like, you're doing these things, there's going to be some discomfort going along with this, right? Like, you have to stimulate these tissues to create an adaptation. It's the thing that we do every day when we're in the gym. There was another really interesting thing about CrossFit as well, where they were measuring the number of people injured based on number of days of weeks that they trained, right? And so it's actually like there's this happy little medium of like, 4 to 5 days a week.
I was gonna get
We're probably going
you
there.
go too little, all of a sudden it's
Too
like,
little, it's
whoa, like you're
too
just
less, and then you're never stimulating enough to create an adaptation.
and you're just jumping into the fire pit.
Yep.
Like every third or fourth day.
Exactly.
But if you do like 8 days a week, which is really hard to do, if
So
you looked
hard.
at a recent calendar,
So hard.
It's
Yeah.
like, when do I even get a recover from this?
Exactly. So there is a happy medium of that 4 to 5 day range where it's like, hey, also listen to your fucking body. It's gonna tell you. You know?
What do you think? Like, we have a little time left. I feel like, where does that play when you see people come in, or just they grab your attention in the gym? They describe, this thing hurts.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think people either have enough self-awareness or articulation or verbiage to describe the right thing? Or where do you find people, because you were telling me about a client like, oh, my ribs hurt. And it was almost the equivalent, the way you're describing it, was like a knife was hanging out. And he's like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And then some people like get a paper cut and they're like, I'm out for like 2 months.
Yeah.
What do you think most of the times when you, just your personal experience, you actually have something kind of going on? Or is it like, that's kind of more the victim of the culprit, right? Because I think rack position gets this bad rep of like, oh, my wrists hurt. I'm like, it's not usually only your wrists aren't flexible enough. It's shoulder, external rotation.
Sure.
You can't get elbows
Sure.
up. Therefore, the bar placement is not a good. And now you're in this no man land of like the bar's drooping off your throat nubbins, as we've been.
That's what they're called.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it in some science place.
Yeah.
Don't worry about asking what it is.
I'm not
though.
gonna
Or the
fact check
source.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now it's drooping, so it's like between your fingertips and wrist, but and so it's like, oh, my wrists. I'm like, your wrists are fine.
Yeah.
Right.
It like a lot of it is that, right? Like this is like the idea of like just because my knee hurts doesn't mean that my knee is actually the problem,
Yeah.
right? It's and actually this is something that we talked about again. I've had really great mentors coming through school, and now these people that I've like taken seminars with, and they were, just because it is there doesn't mean that's the issue, right? Like it's a lot of times we'll talk knee because it's an easy one. It's like, oh, you have a knee problem? Well, it's a real stupid fucking joint, first of all, because it's purely like muscular. There's no like osseous connection where like the joints in your spine, all of them have like, they're like there, and so it's just this like thing hanging out that just gets beat up in between two very stable systems, right? Like your ankle's pretty stable for the most part, unless you have just weak ankles.
Are you referring to ankle and hip?
Ankle, hip, right? Like we talk about this all the time where, oh, my hip is, I don't have range of motion. I don't have this mobility. I don't have access to these strength patterns, whatever. Same thing with ankle, foot, whatever you want to talk about down there. There's a shitload of joints in your foot, right? Like 48 per foot.
Is it something like there's 25% of your bones in
the foot? 25% of your joints, I think.
Joints, okay.
I should know
There's a lot going on there.
There's a lot going on there. And if you have
So foundation up is obviously very important.
Foundation up is always really important. And so if there's something going on, foot, ankle, and I now have a knee issue, is it my knee? No, my knee's probably taking the brunt of, or trying to stabilize that system. And it's just like, by the way, I hate this. You keep doing this, and now I'm mad about it.
That visual to me you're painting is, I feel like your hip and ankle then are playing tug of war, and the tension and that pressure, so to speak, is really in the middle, which is your knee.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. And so same thing, like shoulder, elbow, hand, right?
Yeah.
Like similar system. A lot of times like low back, when we talk about lower extremity, it's not just like from the hip down, it's actually from like your TL junction. So where like your rib cage ends and comes down. And so because
Look at you.
I'm trying.
That's a fancy word, and you caught yourself and then described it for everyone else.
So it's, we are like looking at what's happening from this whole section, right? Like what's happening at your low back, what's happening in your pelvis, what's happening in your hips, how's this like playing into all these things? And so we try to diagnose actual dysfunction, right? Like, oh, we see that this movement pattern is not strong, not mobile, not stable. How do we fix that?
Yeah.
And then hopefully, because we've stabilized something or made something move better or created a stimulus that creates an adaptation, we now don't have pain in that knee because everything else is functioning appropriately.
Yeah.
Which is,
So you said, let's talk about the fix intro real quick. So I think we have a few minutes left. So I just want to do a quick little because a lot of people just want that one nugget, right? They're like, oh, what's the easy fix? And there usually isn't. But what are like 1, 2, or 3 things that pop in your head that you think people do too much of that isn't, it's not like bad for you, but it's like you probably just saw that on Instagram or someone said that and you're just doing the same either stretch or foam roll part of your body, whatever it is. You're like, it's not bad, but there's more bang for your buck. And then what are the 1, 2, or 3 things you're like, most of us are probably overlooking that has a greater return when you do said whatever it is, band, foam roller, stretch, elevated pigeon.
People love foam rollers. They're fine. I use them. I'm not anti. People
love a foam roller.
People love massage guns, right? Like those things aren't bad. They feel nice, but a lot of people like use them
when you put it near your butt. It kind of makes you want to fart.
Oh yeah. It's getting things moving.
Yeah.
So, but like when you're using those things, a lot of people are like using them at night, and then they're not using those tissues. You've created a change in that tissue
and then you go like to bed.
Simulating, and then you just like go to bed, and you're like not using that tissue that you've created change in. I think that's one of my biggest bitches with those things, where it's like it just doesn't. It doesn't translate into, you should use it prior to training, right? Like create better tissue mobility, create better movement mechanics, insert whatever. The other thing is, I think my biggest thing is like people are like, I got this really tight, muscle, so I keep stretching it. I'm like, well, maybe you need to strengthen it. Maybe it needs to be isometrically strengthened, or maybe like you need to look at it in an isolation way, like rotator cuffs or hamstrings, right? Like, or hip flexors. People are like, I do couch stretch every day, but my hip flexors are still so tight. And I'm like, strengthen them.
All right.
Put some effort into it, instead of just being like, I did it twice and it just didn't get any better. You know, I'm like, well, strength takes fucking time.
And then a lot of people just don't know, so they keep doing what they do know.
Yeah, and most people just don't know, right? Like, I always tell people, I'm like, I know too much. So when my body hurts, I'm like, go down.
Trish has never said that.
Let's go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah. So, okay, then what is maybe one thing that either when you do, someone's like, what is that? Or maybe an underappreciated thing? That could help people based on, especially maybe CrossFitters. You see a lot of low back, you see a lot of shoulder.
Honestly, breath work, right? Like learn how to breathe, learn how to create trunk stability, play with it, challenge yourself in certain positions with it, and like be okay with failing. And that's just CrossFit in general. But like be okay with failing, and then just you're trying to get better at it, right? Like I think I was squatting yesterday, and like I was working really hard on creating intra-abdominal pressure, and with this brace system. I've had injuries. I don't want to be injured anymore. So I'm I'm like working on that to be, I'm going to do this perfectly every time.
Yeah.
And then if I fail, or if I get to a point where I'm like, you know what, that was all I had today.
Well, especially these 5x5s.
Yep.
That's a lot of time under tension.
A lot of time under tension.
Pretty near maximal 90%. It's creeping up more for most.
Yeah. For a lot of people, it's a lot of time under tension.
But it's usually not my quads that are like, and you're done. It's like maybe I spilled forward a little bit. I disconnected my bracing. So
yeah.
All right.
It's a lot of time back.
So focus more on the breathing. Don't just foam roll for the sake of it as if it's going to carry over magically.
Sure.
Time it better.
Sure, it feels good, but and you may sleep better, but like do it pre-training, and go hard at it. Like your tissues are fine. That pain that you're feeling. I always tell people, I'm like, anything that has a pulse or feels like electricity, get the fuck out of there.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
I like that. Hey, man, we did pretty good.
Yeah, this wasn't bad.
We cursed the right amount.
I think
said taint a few times. Used some big words, but brought it back.
Yeah.
Popolopagus, what'd you say?
Popolidius.
Popolidius.
Yeah.
Let's end on that note. You did great, man. Thanks
Appreciate
for being
you.
here.
Yeah,
Appreciate
of course.
you. All right, guys, that's it. Hope you learned something, and we'll see you next time.